Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Joint Economic Scrutiny Committee on the 16th of September, on a beautiful day. I can see it out through the window. Unfortunately, we're sat inside looking at this. But hopefully we will get through this and have some good scrutiny and then be able to enjoy the better weather. Have we got any apologies, Sophie?
No, Chair, we don't have any apologies.
Okay, are there any declarations of interest from anybody? Can't see any hands. Can I just ask you, when we talk about we put somebody's online. Can somebody mute themselves, please? Okay. I'd like to just ask everybody that, you know, if you struggle to press your virtual hand, we would prefer it if you used your virtual hand and you then put it back down after you finish speaking. But if you do have a real problem, then do wave your hand frantically. Hopefully we'll notice you. There's not too many people on the screen, so I should be able to, but forgive me if I don't straight away. Right, the minutes of the last meeting on the 2nd of July, good grief, is it that long ago? Okay, is everybody happy with those minutes, and has anybody got anything to point out on them or say on them before we agree them? No. Okay, so that's good. That's silence. Okay, so can we then agree those, please? Is everybody happy that we agree them? Just nod your heads or just smile at me. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right. Item 4 now is our work plan. We have the work. You have the work plan in front of us. Hopefully now you've got it in front of you. What I'm looking to try and do is the main focus here is to populate October and November agendas, as they are very close together. So we do need to find some stuff to put in them, and any other stuff that anybody wants to put in. So I'm asking the committee now, is there anything they wish to put forward to go into either the October or the November committee, please? Can't see any hands. Oh, Patrick. Yeah, sorry, Patrick.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. It's probably not my place to offer an option, but the Golden Valley presentation that we actually saw today, that was very late getting in, and that might be worth you having a look at.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to get onto that. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, that would be worthwhile, I feel, going in there. You heard my comments earlier. I don't know how many people were at the committee meeting earlier, but I mean, you know, my comments were that we need to see the paperwork as soon as it's issued, and the officers do need to get the paperwork out earlier so that councillors have the opportunity to comment on it or read it at least. And then, like we've just said about a work programme, here we are trying to find one. It's only been discussed today, and we only got the information today. So if in future we could have that earlier, that would be better for all of us. But yes, I feel that's a good idea, Patrick. Is everybody else happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Sophie, are you okay with that? Okay. And what officers will come and bring that? Can you line up the officers to bring that forward for us? Okay. Simon, you put your hand up.
Yes, I've just come in on that. No, I think it's really important that we do have a look at the Golden Valley, and it's obviously a really important aspect of the economic development of the county. Just one issue. I was on a call this week with in relation to some of the big tech providers and their commitments to go carbon zero. As you probably know, Google have already, and Microsoft are. And one of the things that was coming out of that was that some of their partners, they would now be pressing their partners to be carbon zero within the next few years. So in terms of reviewing where we're going with the Golden Valley and Cyber Centre and those things like that, we need to be very aware of those if we want to keep those key partners on board. Yes,
Simon. I mean, the problem is we are in in the muddy waters of reaching across two scrutiny committees as well, though, because obviously that would be an environment committee that would necessarily lead on environmental issues. But you're absolutely right. It is the fact that we do push that agenda anyway, and I think most of the companies, the bigger blue chip companies, are pushing their contractors to be exactly the same as them. So I do feel that most of them will fall into line, because if they don't, they will be looking for work elsewhere, I would imagine.
The point I was making, from our economic point of view, if we want to still be working with them, we need to fall in line. That's the key. From a purely economic point of view, if we're going to use those as our partners, that is the point I was making. So it is an absolute economic imperative that we make sure that we're absolutely aligned with these big companies.
I don't quite understand what you mean, because that's obviously something we can pass back on to the joint meeting, for the next joint meeting, so that make sure that they do align themselves with those companies. But from the meeting that I was in this morning, that is exactly what they are doing. They are working with exactly those partners and those big partners to do exactly that.
Okay, yes. It's getting our house in order, not their house in order, is the key. Otherwise, they won't work with us. That's the point.
Okay, do you want to comment on that?
Sorry, Chair, I was just distracted. What was that?
About getting our house in order to align ourselves with these bigger companies. So, are you
in terms of our carbon footprint? I mean, that is kind of in the Environment Committee's remit, but of course we have got a major carbon-friendly project going forward anyway under Nigel, with some ambitious targets in there so that we can reduce our carbon footprint dramatically. I do think we're taking note of that across the entire council. One example would be the new school at Leckhampton that we're going to build, which again we revisited after it was initially designed to actually increase its carbon neutrality. So I think that is an active part, but again, it's something worth scrutinising at some point. And certainly, as you say, tying in with things like Cyber Central, Golden Valley, and the sort of partners and the companies working there, then I think across the sector, we do need to start making sure that if, in some respects, we need to show leadership in this as much as anything else. So, yeah, it's a vitally important thing for the county.
Okay. So right. Okay. So we've got Kate.
Thanks, Chair. I'm having a bit of trouble. Can you hear me?
Yes, no.
Okay.
Only just.
I just wondered if we could look at. Yeah, I'm going to start my video. Hold on, that might help. We had a lot of talk about youth skills and apprenticeships and those kind of offers. Yeah.
Sorry, Kate. You're
today, but
not coming
I really
through.
think it's a piece of work for people who.
Kate, can I stop you? We didn't get 90% of that.
I'm going to have to try and switch. I'm going to have to try and switch to a different one.
Okay. I mean, I'm on that laptop and it's working fine, Kate, so I don't quite understand, but yeah, okay. Has anybody else got any questions on that? I mean, we can include the Golden Valley then in would it be okay to be in the October meeting, Sophie?
It's fine from our point of view, Chair. It's just whether officers would be available. I assume that with the presentation already there, I'll just take offline to see who's going to present.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. And obviously the Cheltenham members need to keep their eye on that one, because obviously, it is sort of centralised around yourselves, and then moving on out from the ripples move on out from there to the other areas. So if there's anything that is particularly Cheltenham a Cheltenham perspective, then the Cheltenham members do need to chip in with that one. Right, okay, so that's potentially October. Have we got anybody who wants to put anything forward for November? Sophie?
Sorry, it's just about just have a tentative item on modular and carbon neutral housing that was suggested last time. I don't know if this is something members still want to look at. I haven't had any suggestions about what would be looked at in that item, so I'm just putting it forward. If it's still wanted, I need some direction on that one.
I mean, it's definitely something that we could look at. It is a very good subject. It's just obviously it's whether we can pull the relevant people in to actually offer good scrutiny, because we need to make sure that we've got something in time. I think that was something you suggested, wasn't it, Simon? So maybe you could work with myself and Sophie and Kate to try and get something up together. I mean, I'm not sure whether November would be too soon to get all the relevant people in place. I don't know.
Yes, more than happy to work with you on that, Chair. It came from really pressure from some of the building sector, from the social housing sector, wanting to build modular housing. And we don't have a facility in the county for building them. And it had been suggested that it would be a really helpful kickstart to deliver government policy if we could have a modular building factory somewhere in the region, ideally in the county, to provide growth and jobs. And it was, what are the opportunities there? So it may be we need to bring in people like Bromford, may need to bring in SGS, and potentially some other people to actually look at that and see whether we can consider that as part of something. I don't know.
Yeah, it was something that Choo-Choo Borough did look into, and the builders that were going to, the modular builders that were going to come in, what they said was if they knew there was a certain element of an amount of forward orders, they would actually then put a factory in place to actually then manufacture those buildings in the capital, because obviously they want an element of if we want them, they want an element of they wanted an element of commitment for orders. There's no point in taking on a factory where they're still going to be shipping it or everywhere else and not within this area. But yes, definitely.
Yes, agreed.
Okay. Stephen.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the carbon neutral housing. I think either at that point, and I'm sure Simon has a view on this, or at some point in the future, we also need to look at retrofitting and the economic opportunities around retrofitting carbon neutral to existing properties. There's a huge cost and therefore a huge opportunity there. And then the other thing I was going to suggest for the November meeting is we probably need to do a regular review of the COVID recovery plan.
Yes, we do. And Sophie, we were going to try and put that on as a regular agenda item anyway, moving forward. Do you want to then, Stephen, put it on as an item on there for a more in depth, or would you just want to just have an update on the recovery plan as we go forward?
I think probably we should have it as a standing thing on meetings, but maybe we need to do a deep dive, and November feels like the sort of right time. October may be too early. But I take guidance as to when the recovery plan gets to that level of detail. But if it's not November, it should be the meeting afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to take the lead from obviously what exactly is happening with COVID, don't we? That's the problem. Okay, we can look into that, Sophie, and we can ask the relevant officers, can we, and come back? Yeah. Right. I then have Paul McCluskey.
Thank you, Chair. The thing I'd be interested in, and unfortunately I don't know what we're going to talk about on the 23rd of September at the local transport review, but the government put money aside for cycleways to be introduced in places across the county, and also having tables and chairs out on the pavement and the road. And I'd just like to know whether that's where the money's gone, whether we've actually done anything, and also how effective it's been. So part of that may be covered on the 23rd of September, but if not, the elements that weren't, I'd like to come back to at some stage to see whether that's is doing any good or not.
Okay. I mean, I don't know which officer can comment on that. I mean, I can comment a little bit. I know some of the money, for instance, for the high streets and whatever, to try and do that. That money went to the districts for the districts to sort out, and also we went to the districts for some schemes. I'm led to believe, but Colin's got his hand up, so Colin can add to that. But I think the districts are heavily involved in a lot of this. So, to be honest with you, Paul, it's something you need to ask your district as well. Colin.
Thanks, Councillor Grenville. As the chair has said, and quite correctly, we went out to the districts, asked for districts' viewpoints and ideas and suggestions. First of all, on EATF, the Emergency Active Traffic Fund, first phase, tranche 1. Some schemes, 3 or 4 schemes were put in, 4 or 5 schemes were put in actually. It wasn't, the limited funding meant we couldn't go much further than that. They were mostly social distancing schemes to enable the high streets to work better rather than cycling schemes at that point. Our main focus was to start to implement the strategic cycle route from Gloucester out to Cheltenham, which is being built in bits already. But the difficult part is to get it out through Gloucester, from the centre of Gloucester up London Road and down Cheltenham Road. And that's really what we've been focused on in respect to the cycling work. And in fact, a lot of that has been, in fact, the new zebra crossings were being laid last night, the night before. It's white lined. The new green materials are due to go down next week when they arrive, because the batching plant, we need so much green material that the batching plant wants to close down, clean its production out, so it can then up green to bring in. So that's why we've had to wait a couple of weeks for that. Next week, so all the lanes will be marked up and the areas, advanced cycle stop areas. And then there's 2 things still to finish on that, to get it to work properly, to get the cycles ahead of the traffic, to get going into Gloucester, to get into Central Lane, to move into Gloucester Centre on the sort of in the access in, which is only available for cyclists and taxis. We've got to get the cyclists in the middle of the road. So what we're going to do is signalise Great Western Road junction with London Road to give an advanced cycle stop line, to give the cyclists a chance to get in front of the cars, to then move into the centre of the road, to get into that position they need to get into centre of Gloucester. That's still to come, because that's a lot more difficult. We couldn't do that quickly, because we need to get this, we need to ensure that we got the funding for tranche 2. We had to get tranche 1 completed by the 5th of September. So basically, we did what we could within the time frame. That was just too much to follow along with that behind. So effectively, the scheme starts about 200 metres outside of Gloucester City Centre at the moment, and then goes up London Road, down Cheltenham Road to the roundabout with the university. The aim really was to connect the hospital, the university, back to the halls of residence first of all, to give that availability and that improved cycle and walking facilities for those people. In addition to that, we have been working with the districts with money they got allocated. They actually got, each of the districts got allocated on average around about 100,000 each to basically reopen high streets, reclaim high streets. They had various different names in terms of initiative, which is probably some of the schemes you've seen going in. And we've done a number of those schemes, for example, in Stroud. We closed the centre of Stroud to create a whole open area there for the market, for the farmers market, and to enable social distancing to take place there. That needed one of the new temporary traffic regulation orders, which we was able to bring in 7 days for that. We've also widened the footways in a number of places in Cheltenham, and at the moment we've got 2 other locations in Cheltenham where we're going to widen the road. There's a little bit of dispute, first of all, where Cheltenham is concerned, because what they did was put the tables and chairs out onto the pavement, which we objected to from a GC, having widened the footways out with the red and white bollards. We intended for the pedestrians then to walk in the road, so for the pedestrians walk on the pavement, and for the tables and chairs to be put out on the road, which normally happens on the continent and other places you see it happening in large urban areas. But Cheltenham at that time insisted on them going on the footway, which caused us a real problem, because we recognised immediately that was going to cause a problem for disabled people, visually impaired, people with buggies and things like that, because they have to go down the curb along on rough surface road and then back up again, where it'd be much easier to put tables and chairs. Cheltenham now agreed to do that, so we're now, once that happens, we're then going to move the next 2 schemes forward for that type of action. So hopefully that's explained where we are. So we've got a number of schemes. We put, I think almost every district got 2 or 3 schemes implemented. Forest of Dean, I think, had 2 or 3, which we had to pull out within 2 or 3 days because some of the motorists weren't happy about taking the parking out to widen the footway. So they're not always been a complete success, but for the most part, been fairly well received and created the space needed.
Chairman, can I suggest we're covering the issue rather than setting the work program?
Yes. Yeah, I know you're absolutely right. I mean, it's just obviously I didn't want to stop scrutiny because obviously there may not be a chance to bring it up later. That's why I let it run. But I think actually, Paul, my answer to your question is really you need to speak back to your district leaders because quite a lot of this is already in the district hands. So therefore, you need to find out what they're doing. Okay. Right. So you talked about the joint meeting for next week. I don't think it will cover that, but the joint meeting is purely about the transport plan moving forward, the whole plan, not just the individual bits that we're now doing due to COVID. So anybody else with any questions? Kate?
Yeah, can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I've switched devices and this is a better one. I did want to, we're still on the work plan, I hope.
Yes.
Good. I put a question in the chat. It's about, there was a lot of talk at the joint meeting about skills for young people and getting young people into work, but I think we ought to be looking at reskilling or transferable skills for our older people who are sort of in their 40s and 50s and finding themselves being made redundant and perhaps, you know, in industries which are not really going to be there in the future or for a long time to come. I've had particular dealings around aerospace, but it's not the only one, I'm aware. So I just wondered if we could have something on that.
We can do. I mean, obviously, it would be something that would need to emanate really from the joint committee, I would imagine. You know, it's something we need to put forward for them to examine and then for us to then scrutinise after they've examined it, I would suggest.
Yes, Chair. I think we ought to prompt them really because I did feel that they had kind of missed that in their discussions. It's going to be a big area. We're looking at what employment rates like, and what we know from last time we had large numbers of unemployed in this country. You know, once people start to get into their 50s, actually the chances of them getting back into the workforce are quite slim. And there was a whole group of men, for example, who never returned to the workforce and were just effectively retired early by the government. And you know, we don't want that. And we're going to have proper economic recovery. We can't really afford that either.
I don't disagree with you. It's just Patrick. Is that something we can introduce to the next to the next or onto a future meeting, so that obviously then we can then bring it forward as a scrutiny item to dial down on it a bit stronger.
Yeah, I'm sure that'd be fine. I'll work on it with Sophie if you like. We can have a look.
Okay, mate. It's just I just feel that, you know, obviously for us to do an individual item, we need to. What we need to do is be scrutinising yourselves and getting yourselves to bring these things forward, so then we can scrutinise it. You know, because this is all part of the same plan, isn't it? I don't know if any officers wanted to add anything to that. No. Okay, thank you. So you've got. I've lost a bit of train of thought now, but you've got a couple of things there, Sophie. Are you happy to take those away and see in what order we can bring them forward and how we can bring them forward?
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll work on the work plan with you after this meeting, and I can send something out to members in a more paper form so we can have a look at it.
Okay, and if any member has got anything that they feel we could look at, please just email it into Sophie, and then we can also look at it going forward. So is that enough for you, Sophie, to be getting on with, or would you like some more? Right, okay, work plans there. So Item 5, now it's over to you, Patrick, to give a report on the joint meeting from this morning.
Right, yeah. Thank you, Chair. Well, the first thing I'll bring forward is the Golden Valley presentation, the Cyber Central development in Cheltenham. And first of all, I will apologise for the presentation coming very late. We also didn't receive it until yesterday evening, but it was a live presentation at the meeting. At this point, I would just re-emphasise that obviously these meetings are all on YouTube. So it would be a good, if you can, for the committee members, the scrutiny committee members, to actually follow the joint committee online, and then you'd have a first-hand appraisal of what's going on. Obviously, that won't work for everybody. But anyway, the Cyber Central was an update on where they are effectively. There is a very good PowerPoint presentation, which I believe Kevin and Sophie certainly have, which I'm sure they will now forward to all your other members.
It has been.
Sorry?
It has been. We now have it because I did contact Sophie during the meeting.
Right, excellent. So if you've all had it, then I won't go through it in detail. But obviously there is some very interesting stuff there. They did a lot of research as to where we sit. And actually, as a cyber specialisation, we're number 1 in cyber location rankings. Also, the other key thing is our position within within our country, and certainly in the Western Gateway as well, and how central that is within the whole location of the country. I think there was one statistic which was slightly misread, but within a 75-minute drive are 19 of the key universities in the country, all within this sector. So the opportunities for the cyber are great. It's a key landmark project, not just for Cheltenham, but for the entire county. And if you extend that out for the Southwest, to be honest. And I think we've got a huge opportunity here to show real leadership. They've done some really quite exciting, which I'm just trying to look for now, marketing materials, a very futuristic, future is golden approach. There's a brilliant video, which there's a link to YouTube, and that has all been received incredibly well. I think one quote, which I will use, one quote in one of the trade papers actually said, quite possibly the most rock and roll trailer for the most rock and roll project. So I think that kind of sums it up. And I think this is a huge, exciting, a great opportunity for us. You have the presentation in front of you. Happy to answer questions on that as well as I can. But I do think this is well worth, as I said earlier, an item for you to look into more depth with the key persons involved in the process and the development. Move on then. The other major part of the meeting today, which followed on from our meeting in July on the 28th, I believe, and that is our Gloucester Economic Recovery Plan. There was some work done before the last meeting. We had a very good debate and a conversation around where we all felt we should be going with this. I think the key thing is that none of us really know where we're all going. And even as you've seen over the last few days and few weeks, things change and opportunities change. The whole thing, this idea of groups of 6, that whole idea of trying to get people back to work, but then the isolation. We've seen the issues around schools and testing. So it's a very fluid process, fluid time. And I think the key part that we need to take on board is that we also need to be fluid and reactive to the situation in terms of our responses to it. We did have some very good presentations on that. The process, well, at the last meeting, we actually came out with what we call 3 C's as an overall approach. First one was collaboration. It's essential that we do collaborate across the county. We have to work as partners. There's no point in us treading on toes, and likewise need to work together so we don't leave any gaps and holes. So that includes all the districts, the county, the LEP, and potentially other further partners as well. So I think that element is coming together well. The other parts then were communication, and we did do a press release after the meeting on this whole approach. That's something I think we do need to be pushing more, because the third part is to try and give the business community and the people of Gloucestershire confidence that we can come through this, that we can come out of it, and we can emerge, and that Gloucestershire will be strong and successful following it. Now, that's obviously a bit of a nebulous thing to tie down, and a difficult thing to instill. Certainly in these times when everything is so uncertain and potentially confusing. But I think it's the combination of the collaborating together, communicating what we're all doing, and then trying to use that to instill the confidence that we are directing Gloucestershire as well as we can through this pandemic. The officer group, senior officer group, have narrowed down to 3 key areas that they want to focus on initially. Obviously, we only have a finite resource, but the 3 key areas they're going to look at initially are the skills, the visitor economy, and then joint lobbying. All the details are in the report. We have a short-term, medium-term, and long-term target for each of these areas, and basically, it's all about trying to do the very best that we can to ensure that we come forward. We've had some excellent feedback, and from other counties as well, that actually we do seem to be on the front foot on this as public sector organisations. But what we need to do is make sure we've got all those elements together, that we're working together, and we've got plans that will work here in Gloucestershire. Apart from that, we had the usual things, the LEP update, business pool update, which I think you guys are going to have anyway. So on that basis, I'm happy to answer questions. I don't know if Colin has anything more to add in terms of the recovery plan.
Not really, Patrick. I think the only thing I would say is that that any recovery plan cannot be fixed. It must remain. It's got to be flexible and responsive. We don't really know even what we're recovering from yet, and until furlough unwinds, we have a better idea. But then, almost as soon as furlough unwinds, I guess dare say that we're going to probably be in a second wave. And then, when you take that into account, no one really knows which way. You could find a massive hit on unemployment. I mean, at the moment, it's masked by furlough and other government subsidies. So when that starts to unwind, and if we end up in another wave, a second wave, and there's no additional subsidies coming in, I think we could find ourselves in a very difficult situation. So I think the golden rule here is about having some fairly clear ideas about general direction, but at the same time having nothing that fixed and being fleet of foot to be able to respond to the situation we find ourselves in moving forward. Because, well, as I said, we just don't know what we're really going to recover from yet.
Yeah. The key thing is, what does the new normal look like? And will there be a new normal? And these are key questions that I don't think anybody can answer at this moment. Anyway, happy to answer questions. Stuart.
Okay, thank you for that, Patrick. Kate, you've got your hand up. Do you want to answer this question?
Yeah, thanks. It was just a question. I know we are going to have the Golden Valley River. It was just about the realism of some of the travel times that are in it. I know Colin Chick raised this in the previous meeting, but looking at it, firstly, talk about travel times by road, not by public transport. It's absolutely critical that our public transport times are fast, and to some of the places we're talking about having connections into the universities with, they're not even possible in some cases. So I think that's a really key issue. And also the 2 hours by train, you cannot get to Manchester or Leeds or any of those places in 2 hours by any kind of vehicle that's widely available, shall we say. So I just think we need to really pin down those things. And it makes the point actually that if we're going to make a success of this, public transport and transport generally are going to be absolutely critical in terms of getting people here. And my second point, there was a question in the early meeting about the university and its ambitions. I think we ought to have an ambition to, and I'd like to see what Patrick thinks on this. Should we have an ambition to have a world-class university, i.e. an existing world-class university in Gloucestershire and working in this area with us, rather than trying to reshape our existing institutions? I mean, lots of universities now have satellite campuses. Should that be something we're trying to build as part of this project?
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, absolutely. Public transport is vitally important and will be vitally important. In terms of we did actually pick up that point, as you said, it was picked up. Somebody mentioned it, but Cambridge is certainly not. I actually think it was Colin. Certainly isn't 75 minutes away. Actually, that was slightly ambiguous. That's not quite what the marketing was saying. I think you're absolutely right. The point is that we do need to be accurate with these claims. Otherwise, you can have the opposite effect. And that's the fine balance, I think, between all this sort of marketing. You try to make claims or that you can substantiate the sound good to put you in the best light. But on closer scrutiny, and as you said, Trams leads, sometimes that does fall down. I think they did pick up the point. They cannot be overselling it. Otherwise, that will have a detrimental effect.
Can I just hang on a bit there, because obviously if we are going to discuss this in the October meeting, I don't want to go into too much depth here because we're going to end up repeating ourselves in October. I'm conscious that I don't want to have two meetings with the same subject twice. So if we could maybe major on Kate's second question would be useful.
Yeah, no worries. And I would say Tim Atkins will give you a much better response as well anyway.
Okay.
In terms of improving Gloucester University, I think the question was about how that would interact. I think the hope is that having this cyber central development here, a hotspot of this sort of activity, would flow out around, so that is the opportunity then for our university to become, if you like, one of the centres of excellence, maybe. I would certainly like to see it as an ambition, but obviously that is down to the university as much as anything else. But certainly I think we'll be having those conversations, and with the opportunities on their doorstep, you would think it would be something that would be high on the radar as well.
Sorry, Chair, I asked the opposite question.
Oh, sorry, a little difficult to hear you, Kate, I'm afraid.
Yeah, sorry, I asked about other universities. Building relationships with other universities, not Gloucester.
Oh, what in terms of getting other universities to be involved in Cyber Central?
Yes.
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that would be a marvellous thing as well. As you know, we do have on our doorstep a number of universities who are very good on this. In fact, my son, just bragging a little bit, did graduate with a 2-1 in robotics from Bristol, which is fantastic. So there are literally on our doorstep companies who are in this field, and I think, we want to create collaborations with, try and get them involved in it. If we can attract brilliant high-tech companies, then obviously the universities would be very interested, because that's the skills base the companies need, and it's the skills base we will need and like to see. So yeah, absolutely, I think that would be great.
Thank you. Anybody else? Put your hand down then, Kate, please. Well, the only thing I was going to add to this is we're discussing an awful lot of things, and I do understand that we don't know where 0 is, we don't know where 100 is, we don't know where anything is to do with COVID and recovery. But the one thing I will say is, on some of the stuff that we discussed today, there aren't any real timelines, and it would be nice to know, because talking to local businesses, as I quite regularly do now, to see how things are going and what they're up to. One of the things they are doing, or are saying, is, well, if you're going to do something, please do it. You know, don't keep talking about it. And that's something that the business people are saying, because they do tend to react far quicker than the council does. But we do need to start reacting as well. You know, because that's what they're asking with some of this stuff. Don't keep discussing it. Can you do it?
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think we have started well. I think we need to be careful that there aren't going to be any instant magic bullets at the moment. There is no instant, unless you're Rishi Sunak, of course, and you can just dole out billions. But unfortunately, we're not in that position. So we have to be realistic about what we can achieve and what can be done. And that, I think, is why the senior officer group have actually come together and focused their minds on where we can have the best impact and the most effect. None of it will be quick. And we're still trying to work out, as you say, where ground zero is in some respects. I mean, you know, anything can happen, and it is happening. So, as Colin said, we need to be able to react quickly to events and step in if there is a place where we can get in there and have a real impact. But we have to be realistic about the fact that we haven't got any magic bullets. There is no simple, easy method out of this.
I mean, obviously, the one thing that did come out of the meeting this morning is comms needs to be right up there. So we do need to improve comms, and we do need to tell those people, you know, if something isn't happening, almost why it isn't happening, not just it doesn't happen, and also I do feel that if we can put timelines on something, that's what I'm trying to say. We do need to start trying to put some sort of, you know, end dates on some of these things. I know it is a moving thing, but at least you've got an idea.
Sorry, Kev, you've gone entirely now.
You can scrutinise and say, well, why didn't we meet that deadline? You know, moving forward.
I think your question was based around putting a timeline to some of these activities and being able to.
Patrick?
Sorry, are you there, Kevin? Sorry, Kevin. Well, I'll carry on then. You can go back.
Did you get that, Patrick, or not?
Yeah. Well, I think that just your comment, and correct me if I'm wrong again, I did miss quite a lot of that, is about putting timelines to some of these events and having some sort of deadlines and things. And yeah, that would be a great if we could. We could certainly take that back and see if there are any things we can put specific timelines on. But as you know, I mean, things are changing literally on a weekly basis at the moment. So any long-term timelines at this stage are probably not going to be particularly useful. As I said, we need to be able to react quickly wherever we can, if we need to, where we can make a difference. But yeah, I'll take that comment back, Kevin. Yeah, perfect.
I'm not actually to start to be able to ask questions as to, you know, targets, why they weren't met. I mean, we never go to something that is going to be fairly fluid, but at least if we give ourselves some sort of parameters, it's not going to be, you know, an endless. The goal is going to be the same size as the pitch then, I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else with any questions?
Hi, Chair.
No, I can't see anybody else.
Sorry, Kevin. Can I just? Sorry, it's Matt. Can I just
Hi, Matt.
So I'm mindful that obviously the Golden Valley thing is for the next meeting, but I just want to sort of underscore at this point, I mean, just how big an opportunity it is. And I know Cheltenham is kind of doing quite a bit on this front already. They've got like it's a bit wider than just the Golden Valley one, but there's a moving to Cheltenham.com website they've just started up to trying to attract businesses in, which I don't know if other members might be interested ahead of the next meeting to have a look at. I guess my point for now, though, is really it's a huge opportunity for Cheltenham, but it should be a huge opportunity for the whole county, really. And I really want to just sort of stress that we need to make sure that this is a Gloucestershire thing, and hopefully at the next meeting we can kind of make sure that it's an opportunity for everyone.
That did come out in the meeting. The fact that they showed the map of Gloucestershire, and they did show how it disseminates out to the whole of the county, not just into Cheltenham. But like I say, I'd like to concentrate, if I could, on this in the next meeting, because otherwise,
I appreciate that.
An agenda item going forward.
All right, thank you.
Anybody with any other questions? Patrick, have you finished your presentation?
Yeah. Yep, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So there's nobody else with any questions? Please shout now or forever hold your peace. Right, okay. Right, so the business rates pool, Andrew Cummings. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. I produced a report for the Economic Growth Committee this morning, which I can talk you through the key points of. Essentially, what we've looked at is how the business rates pool did last year, so that's 2019-20, how the pandemic is affecting it in the current year, which is in a few sort of interesting ways, and also what the future for business rates pooling is in future years. I think for this committee, you wanted to focus on the impact of the pandemic, so I'll largely talk about that. But just to give you some context, the business rates pool works by pooling all the growth that the different councils have above the baseline that central government sets for business rate collection. And then by applying a few sort of accounting bells and whistles, the levy that has to be returned to central government is a lot less by coming together than it would be if all the billing authorities did their accounts separately. And in the report for the committee this morning, I reported that across Gloucestershire, the total pool growth above those baselines was 19.4 million for the whole of county. And once you apply all the different accounting mechanisms to that, what eventually happens is that the gain from pooling, the bit that we save that doesn't go back to central government, which otherwise would do so, is 4.85 million, and that's shared out between the county council, the Strategic Economic Development Fund that's administered by the Joint Committee, and also the district councils, and everyone gets a share of that based upon the original agreement. Now, coming to this year, what we always do in terms of the business rates pool is that we monitor once a quarter on the business rates being collected, and we make a forecast for where the pool will be at the end of the year. And obviously, as part of that, all the districts look at collection rates and trends and things like that. And with all financial monitoring, it starts off early in the year as a bit of a guess, and it gets more accurate as the year goes on. Now, the strange impact that COVID has had is actually in one of the reliefs that the government announced back in March for the retail, leisure and hospitality sector. And they announced that for all of those businesses, with no limit on size of business, there is a 100% reduction in the business rates that they have to pay for this current year. They essentially get billed with an amount of zero at the bottom. And we covered this morning that actually for Gloucestershire, that means that there is a reduction in the amount of business rates being billed to our businesses of £107 million. So it was 228 million last year, and we think it's going to be about 121 million the business rates income for the year. So there's a very significant reduction. The good news for the pool is that central government reimburses all of that grant to local authorities. They did a calculation back in April as to what they thought it might be, and they've paid out accordingly. And they will revisit later in the year to get an accurate figure on the level of relief that was given, and we'll get that final amount. So there's no impact on the pool there, and actually, in a funny sort of way, it takes some risk away from the pool, because previously you have a business which may pay, it may not pay, it might make a revaluation, just all sorts of things that can happen to the business rates it might pay. But now we have something which is covered directly by central government. The twist, of course, is that if the business actually vacates the premises during the year, if as a result of the economic downturn they're not able to carry on trading, we don't still get that grant support from central government. So if there is a significant number of premises which become empty, that will impact on the grant that authorities get, and therefore the pool as well. That will come clear as we go through the year, of course, and we've already heard in the other discussions that we don't quite know what we're recovering from, and actually the end of the furlough scheme will be a significant moment for many businesses. Also, authorities will be looking at their provisions for bad debt and arrears and things like that. I know in Stroud we've seen a small rise in arrears, but nothing significant at the moment. Again, of course, that comes with the caveat that many businesses don't have to pay at all, so they're not going to get into arrears. So that's this year. Taking all those things into consideration, the most recent monitoring figures produced by district suggest that there will still be a pool gain of this year of 4.5 million. And that is pretty much the same as last year. In fact, last year was a particularly good year, so it's well in line with what we would expect, subject to variation, of course. The pool in future years is going to be impacted by whatever the government decides to do. This is central government, of course, around business rates growth nationally. For a long time, they have planned to redistribute growth around the country from those areas that have experienced it to those areas which haven't, and even up essentially. That was planned to happen in 2020, and that was delayed to 2021. And we don't know what the government's plan is. The most recent statement from the Secretary of State is that they will work with the sector to determine the best way to treat business rates growth next year. And quite simply, if there isn't any growth within Gloucestershire, we lose the benefit of pooling because we don't get to distribute that growth. And it also puts us in a riskier position, because if we're already at the baseline and then we see an economic downturn, then it's going to start costing us, and we'll be sharing out costs instead of sharing out growth. And the meeting this morning, we discussed and agreed that Section 151 officers would have a look at this and come back later in the year with some thoughts about whether pooling is still a thing to continue with or not. And that would depend upon not just the economic position in the county and further afield, but whether we get any further information from government. So I think those are the main things within the report, Chair. I hope everyone's had a chance to read it. It was on this morning's agenda. And I'm happy to take any questions that the committee members may have.
You're on mute, Kevin.
Andrew, very useful. Steve, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, and I think, I just echo what Andrew says, really, but on behalf of where we thought we might be when COVID was in its midst. Because realistically, to not be millions and millions and millions out of pocket on business rates, I think is a very positive position. It is because of the extra cash that the government are ploughing into it. I've said this to the 151 officers. I think it would be a real shame if we lose pooling. Andrew, I've said that to you as well. but we have to bring that options appraisal forward to have a look at the different options as to what we could do. If it's everybody's in the same pain, then there's probably not worth it. If there's some pain and some gain, it's worth a debate about whether you share that across the county. And the problem is that the baseline hasn't kept up with the growth. So we've been growing and growing and growing our business rates. The baseline doesn't keep up with that. So there is still a debate about that money should stay in the system somewhere, and how do we get access to that? So I think we need to bear that in mind. I think it's also worth remembering it's not a joint committee decision to pool or not. It's an individual authority decision that then comes together on a collective one. So although we'll try and do it, and normally, I think if I'm right, Andrew, the timing of which is around when the settlement comes out. I think who knows when that will be, autumn sometime. So yeah, we need to think about that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Steve. That the timing is normally just before Christmas, around the time of the settlement, that we have to commit to these things. But normally we know by now what the timing will be, if you see what I mean, on pooling, and we don't. So, but I echo your thoughts there, Steve, completely.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Steve. Matt?
Thank you, Chair. So I think my question's just been answered, but I just wanted to sort of clarify. I mean, there is a risk here that an individual district council kind of withdraws from the pool from their own kind of, because it's in their own best interest. Effectively, that's the risk we're looking at here?
Essentially, yes, because as Steve says, it's an individual authority's decision. The risk around pooling is that when authorities are going on their own, if their income falls below a certain percentage of what it's expected to do, they get reimbursed by government. But when you're in a pool, that percentage reduction has to apply across the board in totality. So there's a much, much higher threshold for what has to be lost before any central government support comes in. So what has been seen in the past, and it happened in Gloucestershire with Tewkesbury actually, is that when you think there is an individual district which will be in trouble, it's normally agreed that they will step outside the pool to not put the others at risk. Early in pooling, Tewkesbury had a significant number of appeals, and that led to costs for all of the other districts. But you're right. What happens if an authority chooses to leave, and essentially you disband the old pool and you have to start again with a new one? It is how it would work. Each authority makes a decision, and then you have to notify central government of what the intention in Gloucestershire is.
Okay, Matt. Okay. I just wanted to add something. I mean, as one myself, but also speaking to other landlords, they still are expected to pay a percentage at the moment of their business rates because they are landlords. They're not a shop. They're not a business that actually, can apply for zero rating, which is then subsidised by the government and whatever else. Now, we are at the moment they are being subsidised totally, but landlords aren't. And I feel that obviously without landlords, you wouldn't have the properties, you wouldn't have the shops and the other business premises. So what are we looking to try and do to help them? Because, I know several people in Dewsbury at the moment, they're looking at putting pop-up shops in places because then it means they don't have that liability anymore. But that doesn't leave then shops available when we end up with turning the problem we've got, hopefully turning it around to actually reinvigorate again if the premises that those people are looking for aren't there.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. And actually, as you say, landlords they get left with the burden. And actually, if businesses move out, then in most cases they're picking up the business rates tab. I suppose what we will be looking to do as we go through the year is build up the intelligence of where that's happening and what sort of support is needed, and we can tie that in with the sort of other economic recovery work that's going on. We can't do anything specifically through the sort of business rate system, rather than sort of gather intelligence and sort of I suppose, develop our recovery policies accordingly to give landlords a bit of support. But you're absolutely right; it is a sector which struggles.
I mean, our business too.
Yeah, of course, completely. And it's important to note that actually, although government has wanted for a long time to be tinkering is probably underselling it, but sort of looking at how business rates are retained and distributed amongst authorities and all that sort of thing. Now the message is that they very much want to do a complete review of the system. Is it the right taxation system for businesses? What the result of that will be, I don't know. But as you say, there are a number of sectors who said it doesn't actually properly reflect their interests and how it works for them.
No, a lot of businesses have disappeared because of COVID, and of now the landlords aren't being paid any money. They're paying out their bills to maintain. They're paying out their bills to do everything else, and also they're paying out 50% rates. I do feel we do need to look at that and help those people out, because it's not particularly fair, is it? If that system penalises them when they're the ones who are trying to facilitate when the businesses want premises. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else with any comments? No, I just scrolled down, so there's nobody else. Okay, so we'll move on. Thank you very much, Andrew, for that, and thank you, Steve, for your contribution. Okay, we'll move on to broadband. Just to remind members that in 2019, the committee had a lengthy update and discussion on mobile connectivity in the county. So after the meeting, members will receive an email with links to outline some of the activities in the industry and mobile operators have been doing since the response to COVID, communities during COVID again, sorry. This update will therefore only cover broadband, not mobile connectivity. So therefore, we will get an update on mobile connectivity on a paper. Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, apologies that Angela and Matt couldn't be here today. Matt is the one who's obviously got his finger right on the pulse of this entire project. But anyway, I'm here, you'll be pleased to know. Simon's there, I'm sure he'll be able to answer anything. If you've got specific technical issues, then I'll get Matt to forward a written response. But in a nutshell, this is an outline of where we are to date and what some of the plans are going forward. As you all know, the technology and the aspirations, the opportunities have changed dramatically and certainly dramatically recently. But we refreshed our broadband strategy for Gloucester and Hereford in 2019 to cover the period to 2022. So we're kind of almost halfway through that. The key element is, of course, what we want is FastShy will enable all residents and businesses in Herefordshire and Gloucestershire to access the connectivity they need and to encourage people to use faster broadband to do more online, boost business growth and achieve their potential. I think we all know that a lot of those aspirations have taken on a sharper context given COVID, although you've all disappeared off my screen. So can you still hear me?
Yes.
Is there anybody out there?
Yes.
Yes, it's all right, is it? Okay. I've got to be honest, I'm one of the last 3% that hasn't been done yet in the county, but I'm told I am on the list this autumn. So, but anyway, the 2019-22 strategy outlines 5 phases. Phase 1 of the strategy has already provided approximately 90% of the homes and businesses across the 2 counties with access to superfast broadband of speeds of 30 megabits or above. The delivery of the current phase 2 of the strategy will increase the total superfast coverage to around 98%. And that's by targeting those areas not covered by phase 1. There's detail in the document, which I'm sure you all have read, but the key elements now are the final few bits where we're trying to reach that last sort of 2 or 3% of the district. And these, as you know, are going to be the much harder areas to target and to cover. So we've got a number of ways of approaching that. We've got contracts. Well, phase 3 is we've got contracts with BT Openreach. This is called Lot 3A, and this is Cheltenham and Gloucester. That's now 80% complete, with around 500 homes only remaining to be delivered in Cheltenham and Gloucester. We're working hard now to make sure that they are all fulfilled. The GigaClear contracts are divided into a set of lots where we've looked at local areas where we can go in there and with a bit of help and support actually deliver. And that's working very, very well. Lot 1 is in the Cotswolds and completed and serving around 7,000 properties. As we go down then, stage 4, this is the process of finalising now a new small lot contract with Airband, which is currently going through the assurance process to bring fibre to the premises to around 700 more premises in the Forest of Dean. And then we have the stage 5. Now, as the smaller areas and the more remote places are the places that need to be picked up, then we're looking at other methods of doing this. So what we're producing is things like the new Leicestershire Community Grant Scheme, and that is where we can actually offer grants and then combine those grants to make it more attractive for suppliers to come in. And that seems to be going well. And that will target then that final 2-3% who still need access. Now, this part of the project is being launched now this autumn. And the project will need to consider and use a more bespoke approach, is what they've said. And individual grants will allow the project to find a solution specific for each of those communities and the issues they have. Obviously, another part of it, which has been slightly overtaken with COVID, and that's the sort of demand stimulation activity. At the end of the day, these infrastructure providers rely on people then signing up and buying broadband to make it financially viable for them. So again, part of our activity is to promote that side so that we can get make it as attractive as possible for the suppliers. I think in some respects, Chair, it's fairly straightforward document. The narrative is quite good. I think we're doing very well. There are still areas, and obviously those who haven't got super fast broadband do shout the loudest. And as I said, I am one of those areas within the forest, but hopefully I will also get sorted out now in the autumn. I think it's quite good in some respects that I'm one of the last because it doesn't show favoritism. But what we've done is try to target where we can have the most effect for the best bang, and then look at where it gets more complicated, more expensive, and then design specific approaches and ways of actually dealing with that and actually delivering super fast broadband to those much harder to reach areas. And I think on the whole, it's been incredibly successful. And by 2022, I think we will have covered the areas in total. Happy to answer some questions if I can.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Good report. It sounds good, but actually on the ground, the GigaClear rollout is not going as fast as it was supposed to. So we've got lots of cable in the ground, but nothing inside it to make it work. And we've still got areas like Churcham, where I've been trying for years to get something done, and we still seem to be leaving a group sort of floundering. So, but what are we doing about those people, and how are we going to pick up the pace on the GigaClear contract?
Yeah, I mean, timescales have always been a tricky one, and certainly a tricky one to nail down. Mainly because in some respects, until they actually get in there and start to do the work, they don't really fully understand what issues they may come up against. So I think GigaClear have had a few difficult moments. One example, for instance, at the moment, I've got a parish council meeting this evening where I'm going to persuade them desperately to sign the way leave so we can get the GigaClear contract in Sedbury moving. the parish council are not dithering, but they just want to make sure, in their words, that they're going to make the right decision. What we need is for them to just do it, and then we can move on. So we do get delays of those things. Way leaves are a particular issue in some places. Other things like church, I mean, what we had there was the problem of trying to get enough businesses together to actually to give enough grants to actually allow us to fill the gap funding necessary. And as you know, that's actually proved more difficult to do than we thought it would have done. If there's any pressure you can put on to try and get some of those businesses to sign up quicker, then that would be great. But we are now looking at those, making those, targeting that with a community grant approach, which is phase 5. So hopefully can actually make some progress up in Churcham.
Okay, thanks. If I could just quickly come back. The other issue I've noticed is that our grass cutters, highways, have hit 1 or 2 boxes on doing their own. So would it be a good idea if they weren't painted green so that they blend in with the grass?
Stop camouflaging the boxes. Well, yeah. It's an interesting point. I'll take it back. Maybe we should do white and black stripes like zebras or something.
Okay, so it's just a bit disappointing if we pay to put them in and knock them over ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
Well, you would hope that some grass cutters, they're not going particularly fast, and a great big green box would be pretty obvious, but hey, there you go.
Thanks very much for that. Can I actually point out, and I'm not sure what we're doing to follow up with this, but I'm one of those people that has had my broadband done. I'm one of those people that has paid Sky for super fast broadband, yet quite a bit of this meeting you haven't been able to hear me. So I would like to point out that just getting the connection isn't the be all and end all, because even when you've paid the bill for the super fast broadband, you've got it to your house and everything else, you can still end up with exactly the same issues as people who haven't got it. So I did think that once I got it connected to my house and once I paid the bill, that this wouldn't happen anymore. But lo and behold, it's not much different to what it was before. So I didn't know what we're doing to check up on that, Patrick.
That is a difficult one. And again, there can be all sorts of reasons for that. Have you got fibre to the premises or fibre to the cabinet?
Yeah, I think it's fibre to the cabinet.
To the cabinet. So there's a copper link then from the cabinet. So things like your distance from the cabinet and things like that come to play. Also your local environment in the home, I don't know, your Wi-Fi and those environments. All of these things can contrive to actually not give you the experience that you would have expected when you signed up for it, I'm afraid.
My Wi-Fi is less than 6 inches away from where my screen is now.
Right. And it was supplied with the broadband? That's
Yes, but it doesn't matter. It's just a generic question. I'm not talking about me today. I'm just generically asking the question: what are we doing about just checking up on things or answering people's questions, because they assume once it's done that they're going to get what it is we've promised, and the reality is quite often they're not, because there's going to be other implications.
Sure, I'll take to ask the question about what we can do.
The other thing to pick up, actually, Patrick and Kevin, is sorry, just to say the other thing you need to pick up is that the Gloucestershire connection itself isn't brilliant, because the way it works from the server is actually down at Cobham or Chobham, and the link has to go from from Shire Hall down and back again, and that sometimes causes part of the problem. I mean, I've actually got 1,000 meg. I've actually got one of the fastest you can get because of where I'm located, and to be honest, it's still pretty unstable at times. So it's not about speed. There's a lot of other things around, and I've got most of my stuff is linked in directly to by an Ethernet cable deliberately, so I don't have to worry about Wi-Fi indoors. So, but you still get the same problems. So, and sometimes I don't think mine's much better than when it was 50 meg at times. So, and certainly not on the Gloucestershire system at times. That doesn't seem to be as stable as it could be.
Okay, thanks for that. Was all that, because obviously was highlighting the fact that people connected has got problems, but what I'm saying is even the people that are connected have still got problems. That's what I'm trying to highlight, really. And also, Steve, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, one of the issues raised in the committee this morning, and certainly something that we need to think about in terms of the new normal for not just those people connected with councils, but everybody, is we're all becoming a lot more reliable on digital connectivity. So some of the things that we've all trained on and become aware on over the last 2 or 3 years, everybody in society is going to become absolutely need to be aware of that. How many concrete blocks have I got in my house? What's blocking my signal? What's transmitting on the same frequency that's causing problems? All that kind of stuff. And I think there is a piece of work to do in society generally, and I think the public sector bodies are going to end up having to do some of this, is about general education on this kind of stuff and how we improve general knowledge and connectivity issues across the whole, not even including some of the stuff Colin was talking about issues in the county council or district councils, but just generally, if you're living on your own, how are you going to connect to the Wi-Fi? And I mean, I still remember a couple of years ago having some conversation with a group of elderly residents when we were trying to improve connectivity issues, and they were saying, "No, I don't have Wi-Fi at all. I can't have Wi-Fi in my building." Okay, how do you talk to your relatives then? Oh, I just message them on Facebook. And she could not align the two issues that she was using Wi-Fi and Facebook at the same time. As far as she was concerned, they were totally different technologies. And I think we have to do more of that. So it's not just about, because we've been having a debate with county council, with council colleagues as well, about digital connectivity for our services. And I think the two issues go hand in glove. I think there's definitely something we need to do in terms of educating and supporting our communities in that activity, as well as just putting the technology in place.
Yeah, I think that, Steve, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like, for instance, for me now, what I could do is almost a help pack of telling me, right, you've done that now, you've still got a few problems. You could do this, and this to help yourself, to help it make it better. We don't have that information. We do what we're told to do, which is you get broadband, you then sign up to super fast broadband, and then you expect it to be fixed. And the reality is, it isn't. Well, because of all the other issues that Colin's mentioned, yes, you're absolutely right. Maybe it's something that as a council we could do that. Because, I mean, this may be an issue with, I've got everybody in the street where I'm living now, all trying to connect, all trying to do meetings like this. So that therefore, whatever advantage you've got, we've got to, because, you've got 30 people down the same street all trying to connect to the same Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and I think we're going to need to take some careful looks at those issues. Just to reassure members of the county council, we know our network is a bit of a basket case, if I'm honest, and in particular, probably a bit like a modern day engine. If you built it up from an old car, we've had technologies built upon different layers and different systems, and at the moment we're going through our whole Wi-Fi and LAN and WAN network and stripping it all out and putting a new one in from scratch, which will probably take us up until about March next year, but we will expect to see some rapid improvements from then on inwards.
Yeah, I do think Kate and I, unfortunately, are on some laptops which are, are connected to that system. The tablets quite often work better. Yeah. Okay. Right. Is there anything else that anybody got? Okay. Hang on a minute.
Yes.
So, hang on. I'm going down the list now. Brian first.
Not trying to speak. I forgot to put my hand.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Paul McCluskey.
Right. Thank you, Chair. Question really for Patrick on the report. Stage 1, commercial deployment. In there it says to deploy full fibre broadband to a number of towns and cities, Gloucester, Cheltenham, Stroud and so on. I just would like to unpack what we mean by to deploy full fibre broadband. Does that mean to 100% of the dwellings in those towns? I say this with some feeling because there are still a couple of not spots in Cheltenham where the cabinets haven't actually been upgraded to what should be the current system. So, and 21 to 23, does that mean it's going to start in 21?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, a lot of work has already been done in lots of those areas, certainly in Cheltenham and Stroud. City Fibre are a commercial company who are coming into the market. They and Zoom are a new one in Stroud, which I did a photo shoot with last week or the week before. They're going to go as close to 100%. It would obviously depend where the boundaries are, and particularly where. Currently, we do know there are some areas in Cheltenham which are particularly difficult to reach. City Fibre have said that they are going to cover those areas, the ones that we haven't managed to get to yet. So, yeah, I mean, these companies, the towns are a lot easier for them in terms of getting in there and density of populations. So they are much more commercially attractive, in which case these companies are coming in and see the benefit of doing it. So I would like to say that, yeah, hopefully they will supply 100% of the towns. If they don't, the other places will be provided for by either by ourselves or by some other means, community grants or what have you. But we are aiming to get 100% coverage.
Is that okay? Do you need to come back? No, okay. Kate?
Yeah, just something that we've looked at before the committee, which is the relationship between any 5G rollout and broadband, where you're going to get super fast speeds over 5G, then that obviously is a really helpful addition in areas where it's going to be difficult to get fibre connections to those places. So it'd be interesting to understand how those are going to interrelate.
At the moment, as far as Fastershire project's concerned, they don't. Fastershire is about delivering super fast broadband in the common sense of the term in terms of fibre. 5G is obviously the mobile technology that we've heard a lot about. That isn't actually taken into account within Fastershire as such. Although it is obviously on our radar in terms of the bigger digital connectivity for Gloucestershire. I mean, as you say, hopefully the overlaps will fill all the spaces and those gaps in between, and 5G could provide a very good solution. I mean, in some areas, sometimes I get better 4G here than I do broadband, for instance. So the technologies can actually overlap and help. But in terms of Fastershire, we are very much concerned with the BDUK project of bringing super fast fibre broadband to Gloucester and Herefordshire.
Okay, thank you. Clara.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's a really interesting debate on fibre and broadband. I'm sure this is probably not an issue directly for this committee, but I hope that somehow we can refer this to somewhere where it might be taken up. One of the issues that happened for one of my constituents, and I imagine it's affected other people because of lockdown, is because the libraries were closed. They couldn't go to use the IT equipment. They couldn't go to the local library, which is what they relied on. And this person, because of their age and whatever, they don't feel it's worth investing in the technology themselves, but they rely on it to keep in touch with their friends. They don't live with anybody else, so they were completely isolated. I have raised this offline with the cabinet member and really didn't get the answer that I was looking for. But I wondered if we could, obviously, if COVID doesn't go away and we're going to have more lockdowns in the future, if there's something that we can, as a council, look at. This is more social, I imagine, than economic. But if somebody that's taking notes could direct this to somebody to be looked at, because it had a really quite significant impact on this person. Thank you very much. And also, I'm joining you today via a different laptop because the one that the county council give me would not be able to get onto this. I just thought I'd mention that in passing.
Right, okay. Steve, you wanted to answer the question?
Yeah, and I think one of the issues that we had in several communities and in several areas across the whole county was that disconnection. My advice would have been to raise a call or get somebody to call in, because we have a telephone number manned into the help hub. And what we would do with the help hub is we would use the connections that have been established in district councils to get voluntary groups and individuals to match that person, so that we get in some contact to those individuals who are at risk of isolation. So I think in terms of the help hub activity that's been going on for COVID, it's been a really, really successful linkages where the county council have put the framework in place. People have called in or gone online if they've got access. And then we've taken those contacts and used the voluntary groups and used the activities in the district councils to make sure people have got some level of contact until libraries or other structures have been established. So we have had similar people coming in contact to us for a range of issues. Maybe it might just be they want some contact to isolation, or it could be food parcels, or it could be all sorts. So I know that's not an answer to your digital solution, but actually from a kind of making sure that the person has got support during COVID times, we have been putting contingencies in place for those individuals.
Can I also add to that, Clara, that there in Cheltenham, it might be worth you visiting IT for Africa. I noticed the other day off Old Stone Lane, because I know that they've given out some IT to different people, because that's what they do. They collect old IT in from people like the county council's old units and other people's old units. They revamp them and tidy them up. They're never going to be as fast as the brand new ones, but for what they're doing, it's useful. So there is solutions out there. So sometimes it is down to us to also push them in and put them in the right direction. There are a lot of community groups out there that do help with IT and supply sometimes that IT that some of these people need.
Can I just come back really quickly, Chair, on that? I appreciate the advice, and this was kind of similar to, I think, what I did say to my constituent. I think the issue are, for some people, they have a routine in their life which is really important to them, and part of that routine is physically, getting out of the house, going to a place. And I think at first it was understood why that couldn't happen. I think it was the fact that the libraries didn't open and offer this service after quite a long time when lots of other things were happening, whereby it could have been provided by some spacing. And so it is really particularly around the libraries issue that I mentioned this.
Well, then unfortunately, that's not for this committee.
No, that's why I'm asking for it to be raised.
I think you need to raise it with the relevant people, because obviously it's not for us to raise it here either. You need to be speaking to the adult social care people. This committee should not be scrutinising or pushing comments onto other committees that it's not linked to, Clara. Sorry, but you need to get it to the right people. Patrick, did you want to come back in on anything?
No, I need to say that it's COVID has been a terrible experience for some people and some groups. It is a very difficult situation, and certainly the more vulnerable ones have probably been affected the most and the hardest. I think we did distribute 5,000 laptops to children with the high needs children who didn't have access to things. So it was a problem we knew about. The libraries are coming back online now, which is a good thing. But obviously, in lockdown, it was taken out of our hands. But I think Steve was right about the help hub would have been a good protocol. But yeah, it's a difficult one, and maybe it's something we need to take on as we move into the new normal.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've still got Kate and Clara's hands up. I presume you've finished now, so could you put them down, please? Okay. Right, I think that's that one done. Thank you very much, Patrick, for that, and thank you for the officers and their contributions, Colin and Steve. Right, the next item, item 9, we're near the end now. is to note the dates of future meetings. I just want to remind you about the joint meeting.
Sorry, Ken, you haven't done my item, the LEP item?
Sorry, I've skipped past it. Yeah, I'm trying to look at 3 different tweets as well. Sorry. Item 8 then, the LEP and Mali. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Good afternoon, everybody. I could have just kept very quiet there, couldn't I? Hopefully, having put the effort into giving you a couple of quite detailed papers, I thought it was worth us having a chat about it. So basically, the 2 papers that I've sent to you in advance, one was about the Q1 data. So it's the paper is full of the actual data. I'm certainly not going to go through that line by line with you, but I think the principle there is this is the local growth fund, the last, the major capital investment that we've been dealing with. We're in the last year of it now. That's Q1 of the last year. The data return to Bays shows how we've been doing and how we continue to do. I mean, basically, we're completely on track. It's not always been easy for multiple reasons to work within the constraints that we have, but working closely with the accountable body, we're working in a way that the government is perfectly satisfied that we're compliant and we're going to be able to deliver the programme on time and to budget. In terms of outputs, we are behind with some of them, as it's mentioned in there, but quite a lot of that, a little bit of it's COVID. I wouldn't want to try and use COVID for everything. It's tempting, isn't it, to always use it as the answer to problems. But things like jobs and housing, we're in very turbulent times. Some of that is just delayed. Some of our numbers will flow through beyond the end of the programme, which is March next year. So the first paper, as I say, you've all had it for a little while to look at it. I think rather than me go through my summaries as I've given you, is that it's under control, working closely with the accountable body. I feel that it's going well. Government judged it as good or excellent last time they looked at us. And I think I'm very happy that we've got some very exciting projects that are delivering well. So before I move on to the second paper, I thought I'd ask if anybody's got any questions about this first one.
Has anybody got any questions? Stephen?
Yeah, I just had a quick question, which is rather detailed, but on employment land, do we have a view on how much unfulfilled demand there is? I guess that may change in multiple ways as a result of COVID, but just ignoring COVID for the moment, do we have any feel for what demand there is in the county for employment land?
It's a really good question, which is tested at due diligence every time a project comes forward saying, and in fact, when I come on to the next paper about the Getting Building Fund, when projects come to us saying we're going to deliver employment land or business units, the question back to them is, what is the demand? The quick answer is we don't have a definitive answer to it. We have various ways that we test the water. So we get the views of the agents, and also we have an inward investment team that look at the queries that are coming through for employment land that we may not be able to satisfy at this stage, but would otherwise have been likely to land with us. So rather there being I think it just is impossible to get it exactly, quantify what the demand is. What we sometimes rely on is past experience, like the Gloucester Business Park, where there was this question was raised before the investment was made there, and there was some scepticism, but now it's filling up really well. So there's a bit of a build it and they will come moment. It's a bit like we had with the cyber park. There's been lots of very positive talk about the cyber park today, and we can now all feel very much more confident, I think, that the demand is there for that. But if we go right back to when we were putting in the bid for the funds to facilitate the cyber park, we had exactly the same question, but for 22 million. And it was quite hard to know how many cyber businesses would come and use that land, So it's a question we ask and we try and get an answer to. But it's a fluffy answer, but fundamentally we can't quantify it and nail it, but we do try as far as we can to get an answer to it. I hope that.
Thank you. And my question was not to imply that there was a shortage or surplus. It was really an honest question. Do we know what the level of demand is? But thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Is there any other questions on that first paper? Okay. Well, moving on to the second paper, I think this is one of particular interest to the committee members here, because we've just been through an incredibly fast process to get to process the Getting Building Fund.
Thank you.
Again, I provided a fairly detailed paper on that. But I think that the point I wanted to make is perhaps to encourage councillors to be aware that right at the beginning of all this relies on everybody in the districts and the county council engaging with the shared piece of work with the senior officers group to maintain a pipeline of projects that could release economic growth, which is the capital investment pipeline. If we didn't have that, and we didn't have that to go back to, we would have been in a lot of difficulty to then make progress when government throws an opportunity at this like this with 8 days to respond. But it's not the only thing we do. But for this audience, I think it's important to continue to engage with the capital investment programme, which is through the senior officers group. As you can see from my paper, I mean, this is particularly a part of my role. I've been doing this job long enough to know that although we don't know when it is, we know that government will always throw us these opportunities at very short notice. So we've been spending most of 2019 to try and create a long list. But the long list is one which has no criteria attached to it other than growth, or the criteria that the LEP and the Joint Committee agree is generally sensible. So we did a lot of work on that, which did mean that we had a long list, which meant that when this opportunity for Getting Building Fund going came to us, we had a very robust group of project promoters that we could go to say, are you able to respond to this? And that's how we progressed through this whole process. We've also been very conscious, and it's your job as a scrutiny committee to look at this, which is why I took some time over the paper, to make sure that we have made progress in a fully compliant way with the assurance framework. And we have been doing that, and we've been checking with the accountable body as we go that we've been doing that. In some cases, that means we've been having to do things quicker with less notice and less consultation. But fundamentally, we've been as compliant as we feel we could be under the circumstances. And we've now, in fact, since I did the paper, there was a board meeting this week which has approved the funding for the fifth project, which is the one at Heartbreak for the agri-tech farm. So we've now got 5 projects that have gone through this whole process. I've got approval from the LEP board to go forward for funding. The only thing that's holding us up now, ironically, is that government has still not given us the full detail of the grant conditions. So we can't yet flow that through to the funding agreement. So we only have 18 months for the projects to deliver and completely build out their projects and deliver. And the thing we're waiting for now is government, but we are expecting the funds to flow probably early October, and they can't flow without them giving us their grant conditions. So hopefully within weeks we'll all be on track with that. So you've got there in the paper the list of all the projects and also some of the other detail around the process that went through. So that's my bit of my take on it. And again, I'm very happy to take any questions that anybody's got. Although I seem to have lost you all on screen for the moment, but a bit like happened to Patrick earlier, but I'm still here. Okay, so are there any questions from anybody? Chair, I don't know if you can see anybody.
No, this is a new question. It's notable that in those that were successful, none of them were in Stroud. I actually think they were everywhere but Stroud. I'm just interested in your view on, why that might be. Is there something wrong about the schemes that were brought forward by Stroud? Is there something we could learn from that? Could we do better next time?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's anything to do with locality. It's a good question again, but we certainly didn't try and say, right, let's divvy it up around the county. We did have some projects from Stroud. I'm just trying to run through in my brain exactly what we had because I've been working with so many projects. I think the easy answer is the ones that came through at the top happen to suit this list of criteria the best. and fitted within the funding envelope that we had. When it came down to it, we were quite pleased that there was a reasonable mix. We're very pleased that some stuff across in the forest and Gloucester and all over the place. So we're very pleased about the mix. But yes, there were many more losers than winners in this situation. I think what I would say is, if you are approached by any projects that didn't get through this time, I'm very happy to have a conversation with any of them, and I'll feedback to them individually. We will be. My plan is, as soon as I can get over this little bit, which is still quite intense, we will be going back to the long list, because I'm sure there will be another fast opportunity very soon, and I think we all have to work together to make sure that all the projects, wherever they're from, have the best chance to succeed. I suspect, I can't, without processing it in more detail, look at the Stroud ones, but there was one I'm thinking of now. Actually, it was in the shortlist, actually. So there was one in the shortlist. I think it was just that there was a very clear scoring mechanism against the particular priorities that were given by government. And the one I'm thinking of in Stroud was actually on the reserve list, because we were hoping that if something fell through, there were 3 that we kept on the reserve list. So it got close. It's not so good being the bridesmaid, but not the bride. But yeah.
It's probably something to take offline, but I think we probably would like some feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that. Okay. Anybody else got anything else for me?
Yeah, no, it was just, we did speak to you a while back about, obviously, you providing us with information, and obviously one of the questions that was asked is, how do you choose them, why do you choose them, and what is on the list?
Yeah.
And we're now still asking that exactly same question, because you were going to provide us with that sort of information.
Sorry,
as councillors, we want to try and help our individual communities to achieve something.
We did. Going back some time, David and I gave a presentation about that, and we referred to the assurance framework, which has the basic criteria on it. And I think that's probably, I would refer to that again. So that's all online, the assurance framework.
Yeah.
So what the process flows from that. So that's a public document. So if there are no other criteria, in this case, we were given some very specific criteria from government. But if that doesn't exist, our general criteria to get on the long list would be based on the criteria that are in the assurance framework. And I'll tell you the next bit, which is that having got those criteria, when projects put forward expressions of interest, those are viewed by an internal team to review how they fit against the criteria. The reason that the long list is so long is that lots of projects fit some and not others. It's not at that stage, it's not prioritized, but it gives everybody a fighting chance. And then the next stage, the one that I've described in this paper, is where we have to hone it right down. And then there is a scoring matrix, which is created based on, so in this last instance, the scoring matrix included our normal scoring mechanism about growth and job creation, but was weighted very heavily towards the criteria that the government gave us. And that was scored initially by an internal exec team of the LEP, but only to help guide the LEP board members, who then went through the proper prioritisation, as it says in the assurance framework. They went through the process of reviewing all of those on that shortlist and taking them forward.
But Mally, what I'm trying to say is, how can we scrutinise? If you just say the mechanism is online, you go through the mechanism, there isn't, the element of scrutiny has been removed. We can't say to you, well, why didn't you go with that project? Because we feel that project would have been better than that project, because we feel that saying you're going to a scoring mechanism and the way you score things, that removes any element of a question of scrutiny, because you're just going through a mathematical process. We then have no input to that.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think a lot of this happens in collaboration with so I agree that doesn't come to this committee. It happens in collaboration with projects. Yeah. I need to take that away and work out what is doable. So can I take that away about what more that we could provide?
Because the government did come back to you on your last review and say even though you turned up to a scrutiny committee, they didn't feel you were scrutinised enough.
Yeah, no, fair comment.
How can we scrutinise you if we don't get the information?
I mean, what I hoped I provided you not with exactly what you're saying, which is the scoring matrix. Now I'll have to take guidance as whether that's something that I'm in a position to share or not, the actual metrics. But what I have shared with you is blow by blow the whole process, other than what was in the metrics. What I've shared with you is how we processed it all. So I was hoping that the paper I gave you today, although it doesn't provide that element, which I understand would be of intense interest to you, I have provided you with absolutely everything else.
And a list of projects that did apply for it, that didn't get it, and why did, because then at least we can understand what else it is you have been looking at and doing, because at the moment we have no idea at all, because we're only getting a percentage of the information. Okay. We're told by the government that we don't scrutinise you enough. You need to give us that information to be able to do that.
Okay. Can I take that away, because as some of it's not in my gift to offer anything here, and I'll need to get guidance on that.
Yeah,
I would hope I would like to reiterate that I hope that you feel that you've had a lot of information today in terms of the process, and rather than thinking that we've failed to come forward with anything, I understand that you would find it much more useful if, in addition to the process, you also had more of an oversight of the scoring matrix and the projects that were successful and the projects that were not successful this time around. Some of that is in the public domain. The shortlist was certainly shared selectively, and there are quite a number of people on this call who will have seen the shortlist and will have been able to very easily see from the shortlist who didn't get the money, because they now publicly announced who did get the money.
Yeah. I'm just trying to add to the fact that we need to add substance to it, and obviously with Stephen's question, he's highlighted that to me. He's from Stroud and he's not aware of why and what.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll leave it to you to take offline, but it's just obviously it's just something that
I do respect the question, absolutely. I'm not trying to be evasive. What I'm trying to do is find the most robust way of making progress with it. But I must reiterate, if there are any projects that you're aware of, if I go back to what I said at the beginning about the capital investment pipeline, that's a public document, that's shared, it's your document because it's a joint committee document. If there are any projects on there that I would encourage you to make yourself familiar with it. If there are any project on there you're interested as to why you've not heard anything about and what's going on, just ask us and we'll feedback directly. I know that's again not answering, but some of this information is with you, but not all of it.
We can only ask questions on something we know about. Okay. Gina.
Yes, thank you. No, sort of going on from that, I mean, I also think that the Cotswolds haven't done very well out of this either. It would be helpful not only to see why perhaps projects or applications failed, but to see what is required to have a successful application, because it takes a lot of work putting these things together, and it's always good to have some guidelines on what is being looked at and what would be successful before going about it. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of responses. The biggest project that was funded in this round was in the Cotswolds. It was at Cirencester College, which is in the Cotswolds. So there's the Digication Centre, which we're very excited about, which is at Cirencester College, was in the Cotswolds. So I think I wouldn't talk to Stephen too much about Cotswolds not doing very well, because Cotswolds actually did better than Stroud. Sorry, that was that point. What was your second point? Tell me the second point.
The point was how to make an application which would fulfill the criteria. And thank you for that. Actually, on this listing, of course, some of these things, it doesn't say where they are. So that's probably why. So that's why I'm a bit confused.
As Sophie will attest, I had to produce that paper in short. Absolutely, that's an error. I did it in short shrift, and so I forgot to do that. Sorry, I absolutely meant to answer your second question, Gina. We give enormous amount of clear detail to projects about what they need to do when they fill in an expression of interest or they fill in a full business case. And it says under every section, this is what you must tell us. And it's all, over the few years that I've been doing this, I've realised I've got to be very, very clear with people, because they don't even seem to do what I would say was fairly obvious, like tell us what the project is. So I'm very happy to share those templates with you, because that's what a project gets very early on, which it says every single section, and those sections would be the ones that were scored. It doesn't tell you how much each one would be scored, because that varies depending on the opportunity, but it will tell you exactly what on each of the sections, what it is we need to hear from you. Our problem from projects is that they very often we've had some brilliant exceptions this time, but very often people fail to answer teachers' question. So they have the guidance, but I'm very happy to share that expression of interest form, because I think that answers your question, because it tells a project exactly what they need to do to be able to tell us what they're doing, so that it can then have a best chance. Where they fail is that they repeat themselves and go off on a tangent, don't actually tell us specifically what we will buy with that money. That's normally the problem. There's lots of visionary stuff, but they don't say, give us over £4 million and we'll do a fantastic education centre at Sciences College. Did a brilliant application, and one of the reasons they got through is they followed the guidance. So the guidance is there, but maybe there's no reason why any of you should have seen it. But very happy to share that, because we send it out to anybody who wants to put forward an investment.
No, I think it'd be very helpful to have that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Stephen, did you still have your hand up from previously?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I'll take it down.
Kate, to you.
Thanks, Chair. On that point, then I think it would be helpful, perhaps, for the committee to just have a discussion around a successful example like the one we just heard about, so we can really get into what was it about it that made it an acceptable application win. I think that's something we could do at another meeting.
If that would be helpful, I could certainly do that, no problem. We could use that as an example to answer what Ken's talking about. Happy to do. If that's a good way of doing it, happy to do it.
Can you note that one down, Sophie? And and Kate, what we'll do is we'll have when we you have our usual catch-ups, we'll have a chat on about that one. Okay. Right. So is there any more questions? John.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, it was just picking up on something you said, Mally. You said the scoring mechanism that you used changes from project to project.
No, sorry, not project to project. It changes from funding opportunity. So it's exact. So if you've got 50, as we had 15 projects on the shortlist, they all have exactly the same scoring criteria, but the scoring criteria was based on the government guidance for the funding opportunity. So they were what I've listed here. So within this opportunity, we created an adapted scoring mechanism, scoring metrics, to then apply to every single project.
For that opportunity.
For that opportunity. So I'll give you a really simple example.
Okay.
The most important thing on this opportunity was deliverability within 18 months.
Yeah.
And that knocked out loads of exciting projects because they just couldn't. We offered everybody on the long list to say, can you meet these opportunities? But the most important one from government's point of view, it has to be done in 18 months. Well, on this scale, that's a big ask, and an awful lot of projects dropped out at that stage. But that's this opportunity. The last one was a 5-year program. So if the next one's a 5-year program, that criteria would disappear, and we would apply something that says, can you deliver within 5 years? So sorry if I might have.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah, thank you. I was just trying to get my head around how we as a committee can do the scrutiny if we're not privy to the criteria that relates to a specific opportunity.
I think that's the point I'm going to take away from Ken. I mean, I do understand the question, and if I was sitting in your chairs, I'd probably be asking the same question. So I'll take that away and work out what it is that I'm able to share. So what I suggest I share is the expression of interest form, because I think that will answer Gina's question. And I'll come back to you on the scoring criteria. And also, that's the main thing really, is the scoring criteria for this particular opportunity really, isn't it?
But, yeah, I mean, I guess that if a different opportunity comes along, your scoring criteria is going to alter. It's either going to go up or down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes you've moved into my world of complexity, which is it's very difficult because the next opportunity might be only about skills or only about infrastructure, and again, you then have a scoring criteria that only deals with those things. So we have to maintain this long list of all sorts of different things that we can then pull on when it comes through. My biggest challenge is government never gives us as much notice. Yes. So, and I think. Yes. I understand that there's some discomfort about this latest process, but we had 8 days to do this. We didn't have 8 months or 6 months we would normally expect for something like this. So, I'm not saying that excuses everything, but it does explain the way we've had to process it.
I understand. I was just trying to get my head around the idea of scrutinising something which has its basis in subject. Being subjective really rather than scientific entirely. Thank you.
And that may be, Mally, something you can say to the government when they come and inspect you again next and say there wasn't much scrutiny, and say, well, we can't get much scrutiny on 8 days.
Yeah.
But there you go. Okay. I don't think there's any other questions. I think was that your hand still up, John, from previously. Right, okay. And forgive me for missing you out, Mally. I'm just trying to look at 3 or 4 different
That's fine.
People say I need a PA, but I can't have one. Okay, right. That's that one sorted then. Thank you. Future meetings, as I started to say earlier, before Mally quite correctly interrupted me to say, "What about me?" On the 23rd of September, which is next week, we have a joint environment and economic growth scrutiny committee, which I'm chairing, and that's for the next reiteration and coming back to us on comments from the local transport plan. So I encourage everybody to make sure they're there and in plenty of time, please. And then obviously on the 21st of October and on the 18th of November, which we've just discussed, Sophie will get back to us on which items we will have on there. As I said, it'll be Clara and it'll be Kate. I'll have a quick chat with once we've got that list up together, and then we can move forward with that, and then we'll be in touch with Katie. The other thing that we did quickly talk about was obviously the meetings that we went around the area to do. What I would encourage members to do who are from districts to communicate with their districts and to come back, because we are hoping to put, it was something you had in email today, we're hoping then to give a time for questions from those district members coming back from wherever they fed the information back to their district. So, for instance, like me at Tewkesbury Borough Council, John gives a presentation of this meeting and of the joint meeting in the morning to our scrutiny committee. He then gets asked questions. What we're hoping to do is to move on from not just going out to districts, but to move on from district councillors to come back and ask questions coming forward that have come back from their members, from their councils. That's just a quick overview on that, so that you can, when you read what's said, you can understand it. And if there's any comments on that, please comment back to Sophie. On that, we've got the Executive Director's report. That is for information only. And if there are any questions, if you could please direct those back to, I presume, Sophie. And then Sophie can send them on to Colin for answers. Look, thank you all for today. I know it's one of those things where, we're all in a world where we get buffered from time to time. But thank you very much for your time. It's been a long day. Bye all.